is essential for marketing, especially right now in 2024. Well, actually, it's essential for any year, but really even more so for 2024. Because just like during the recession of 2008, the global pandemic, we're still in it and getting out of it, and many other economy challenges. Those that have a strong brand and continue to market will survive and even grow. Those with the strong brands, they are the winners. But when we think of marketing for podcasts, what does that mean? A lot of people think, marketing encompasses social media. Yeah, it's more than just social media. It's more than just having a logo or pretty colors or that really nice font. Most of the time, you don't even know it's happening because a good brand works behind the scenes. A brand is relationship-based, but at the forefront, it is also how you represent yourself or your podcast. Branding is part of that foundation. It's your job to communicate why your podcast is worth listening to for your listener. What's the benefit to them? The goal is not to get more downloads and see those numbers rise, but it's to serve your listeners either with knowledge, entertainment, connection, or something else. Listeners are really choosy right now about spending their time to do something because it feels like we're all lacking time these days. So when a listener is listening to your podcast, they're essentially hiring your podcast to do a job for them, right? It's either to gain that entertainment or knowledge or that connection piece. That's what they're looking for. So you want to make the best podcast you can with the capacity that you have, just like any job that you actually like. We're not going to count the ones that we don't like, that's for sure. But like art, there's no one perfect way to do things. And podcasting is really a creative pursuit. So what works for one show might not work for another show. And for you to make a well-informed choice, you need to learn some foundations first. This is where my guest comes in. Last year, I met Brigitte Bojkowszky, who is a global and personal brand identity strategist and the founder of Brigitte Brands. She's got a passion for brand excellence, and when we met online, we clicked so much talking about audio, branding, and podcasting. And then actually found out that she lived in Victoria for a short time. That's where I am, in Victoria, BC, Canada. I always think of it as such a small town, but people know where Victoria is. And so I was really surprised that she actually lived here because her career spans 23 years teaching global marketing management and branding at universities across the globe. And that's where her stop in Victoria twice actually happened. Brigitte now guides entrepreneurs and organizations through her mission to craft captivating brand identities that radiate beauty, brilliance, and authenticity, ultimately attracting the clients and recognition her clients truly deserve. I knew she would have amazing insight into how podcasting is another touch point in your marketing strategy and what you can do to grow your brand using audio branding alongside the visual brand, since marketing and podcasting works in harmony side by side with each other so well. And you know what? You can't talk marketing and branding these days without mentioning AI. So listen in for her take on how your podcast with AI is actually like music. So welcome to episode number 73 with branding expert Brigitte Bojkowszky on the Podcaster's Guide to a Visible Voice. So let's go. Brigitte, thank you so much for coming on the show. You are such an expert in your field, and I can't wait to dig into your brain about all things branding.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here to talk about how brand building serves as a linchpin in navigating this dynamic podcasting world that is out there.
Ooh, linchpin. That's such a great descriptive word.
Yeah, it is. And I think it fits it. It describes it.
Just broadly, what do you mean by that? Just for people who are still like, I don't know, what's branding? Isn't it just like a logo and some color and some fonts? What do you mean by that linchpin aspect?
Yeah, so that's a very narrow perspective on branding when we talk about logo, when we talk about colors, when we talk about a tagline and a name. But there is so much more to that. And branding starts much, much earlier. So if you look at it like a process, yeah, branding always starts with mindset. And when I talk about mindset, it's all about what is my vision as a person, as a business owner, as an executive, or as an employee, or, as I said, business owner, entrepreneur, starting your journey. So you have to know where you are going. You have to have a vision. You should have a mission. It's how you get there. What's your higher purpose and your underlying values? This is part of branding, and this is the early part. That's where you start. And then you go from there. And logo and a tagline and a name comes further down the road. This is when you really try to express your brand visually.
Yeah, it's more like really getting to know who you are, like
Exactly.
when we're getting into a new relationship with someone, we got to know what we like before we can express what that's like.
Exactly, because it's all about creating a brand identity. As you say, you need to know who you are. You need to know who you are as a person. And you also need to know who you are, what you stand for as a business, whether it's a corporation, whether it's a small business that you start out with as a solopreneur. So it's all about understanding who you are and shaping that identity based on that. And also based on how you want to be perceived by the world. So you have a certain amount of control because you are planting a seed out there, yeah, with how you interact with people, how you present yourself through all the different touch points. And one of the touch points is, obviously we talk about that today, podcasting as a host, but also as a guest. We shouldn't underestimate the other side. Yeah. So I'm your guest today. I'm also presenting myself today. So there's two parts of that coming together, bringing about something. It's entertaining, it's educating, it's informing our audience.
Yeah, because every person has their own brand. And so when you become a guest on someone's show, you're bringing that brand to the other brand's table. And how do they mesh and gel well together?
Yeah, and that's the question. It's about the chemistry, right? It's about what are we both creating that we cannot create alone for our combined audience. That's why we are doing that. You're having me on because you want to tell a story about the intersection of podcasting, brands and brand building, and brand identity, right? And so I'm also, by being guest on your show, extending my reach with my audience and also extending your reach with your audience. So we both grow through that, right? And we also nurture our listeners, or maybe reach out to more potential clients or more potential business partners. So whoever listens to that might take away something from it.
And you have your own podcast too, Brands Talk.
Yes. It's all about stories. It's all about inviting people who tell their personal brand story, their personal development, becoming an entrepreneur. Or it's about big brands telling their stories, how they internationalized, how they entered different country markets, how they are managing their brands across borders, or having other, let's say, branding experts, like someone who is talking about brand colors or talking about other aspects of branding. So I like to have other experts in that field coming in, or from related industries. So there's always certain aspects that you can combine with branding. Or for example, leadership and branding. This is a really interesting combination because as a leader, you are also a brand that usually others follow, others look up to. So there is all the different versions of bringing about something that contributes to more value for our listeners.
So yeah, let's narrow in more on the podcasting aspect of branding. Like, why did you believe that a podcast would be a great extension of what you're doing?
Okay, so when I started out during COVID, and there was this, everything, the whole world basically came to a standstill and everything was shutting down. We could not do our business anymore as usual. I have been teaching for 23 years at universities, but I always had kind of temporary contracts as a teaching professor. So that ended. And I knew I wanted to start my own business. I started doing workshops for companies, which I couldn't do anymore. So my business model was not feasible anymore. And I needed to reinvent myself somehow and figure how can I build awareness in the market and then an image, right? There was this trend of everyone is starting a podcast, and I was looking into that and I thought, I can do that too. This is something where I can sit at home. I get all the equipment and start talking. And also with Zoom, inviting people to my show. It was like, this is interesting because now I can have conversations because I always loved to listen to stories. So I thought this is the perfect thing for people to tell their brand story, whatever brand we are talking about here, in whatever respect or from whatever perception we talk about brands. Then I started. It was really a wonderful journey because everyone said, yes, I would like to be on your show. So I never had problems getting guests on my show. Then there was a time when I thought, now I'm ready to also go live. Because at the beginning, I really had trouble showing myself, being visible via audio. So it was a hurdle for me because, English is not my mother tongue and, you're not coming across as fluent as other people. It was kind of tricky for me just to overcome that. I'm very sensitive when it comes to these kind of things. And so it took me a while. And after 1 year, I started lives with also being visible with video and audio. And that's what I'm doing now. And I have realized that you have an extreme reach. You can reach out worldwide. I mean, when you are doing that in English language, you can pretty much reach everyone around the world if you want to do that. But usually you should niche because you're focusing on something specific that you want to talk about, right? So it offers a really unique blend of accessibility, for example. And then also creating authentic connection because it's the intimate nature of podcasting.
Yeah, exactly. I love the accessibility of it as a listener, but also as the host as well.
Yes, it has different levels.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to touch back quickly on, you had mentioned earlier about English is not your mother tongue. There are some barriers, mental blocks sometimes for a lot of people. Because of things like that, they don't want to start a podcast. But I love how you were like, it's just easy, so why not do it? And I think for people who English is their first language, that might be one of the things where they're like, yes, I can just plug a mic in and I can start talking. This is going to be great. But when do you actually think a podcast might not be a good idea for someone's brand?
You need to first make sure that you have a brand identity. You need to have clarity about that. And that means you need to know what your vision is. What do you want to achieve with a podcast? What your overall mission is as a business owner. And you have already built up your personal brand and company brand identity. That needs to be in place because a podcast is a way to promote that. When you already have that and you start a podcast, you are in a process of building your brand awareness in the market, because the podcast is a tool to present yourself to the world. So you need to know who you are before you present yourself to the world, because
makes
you have to
sense.
tell a story, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And a podcast is a brand building tool, as I said. It's a communications tool. And a communications tool helps you to do something. Usually it's to communicate your brand and build your brand. And this is a long-term thing. It's not a short-term thing. Marketing, on the other hand, is usually a short-term thing. Yeah. To promote something like next week we have a sale, everything 20% off. This is a short-term thing that directly converts into money. Podcasting is not something like that. It's a long-term brand building tool. It's a communications tool. It's a communications goal. What do you want to achieve with a podcast? So there needs to be certain things in place before you can start a podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And that needs to know who you are as a brand. You need to know what you want to communicate to the world. So you need to know your brand identity.
Are there some key questions that we should be asking ourselves then to make sure that we have these foundations in place?
Yeah, the key question, who I am as an identity, how am I distinctive? How do I break through the noise? Because there's like millions of podcasts out there. Because you need to consider that podcasting is a long-term game. Until you have a certain fan base or audience, you need to have persistence, because the power lies in this consistency, having perseverance and having persistence in podcasting. Because I want to give you just some numbers. There are over 2 million podcasts out there currently, because they have extreme popularity at the moment, and it's still growing. And the number of podcast episodes is more than 50 million right now.
That exist in the world. That exists.
That exists
Yes.
right now in the world.
I do want to also say that there is a difference, although there are those stats out there. When people do start a podcast, they do feel like, oh my gosh, there is so many. Why should I have one, right? But also, although there are millions of episodes, not all shows are still active. Like there's only a few handful
Exactly.
in that number that are active shows. So what you're talking about, that consistency, that part is key.
Yes, it is key, because 90% of podcasts don't get to a fourth episode.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
they drop out after the third.
Yeah.
And another, from those that remain, from the 10% that remain, another 90% drop off after 20 episodes. So you need to push through that time. So that means then you, when you have a certain awareness, a uniqueness that differentiates you as a player, and then you can grow your audience. You have a good chance to really build a strong audience when there are certain factors in place: authenticity, trust, that you're consistent. Also consistent in having a presence when it comes to when are you dropping an episode? Is it every week? Is it bi-weekly? Is it monthly? You should have consistency in that, but also consistency across platforms. So where is your podcast available? Here, this accessibility comes in here again. Is it on Apple? Is it on YouTube? Is it on Spotify? Is it on all the major platforms? Where is it?
It should be everywhere.
It should be everywhere, right? So there's a lot of other things that come into play. And when you think, I could earn money with podcasting, that also takes time, because an agency that does sponsorship with you, they will not be interested in you unless you have at least 3,000 to 5,000 downloads per episode. So to build that momentum takes a while. So you have to have endurance, persistence, perseverance, and you need to commit yourself fully to it. And then there is another money factor coming in, because at the beginning as a solopreneur, you might not have the financial means to outsource everything, all the work to a VA, a virtual assistant. So as I did it at the beginning myself. I edited the podcast. I did everything from artwork, from the music, everything to kind of get this thing published. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of work. A lot of effort goes into that. And you're not earning anything. Yeah. But you also need the time during the week. How many hours are left? Even though when you are working 24/7 as a newly minted business owner, but you also need to carve out time for acquiring clients and serving your clients. So when do you have the time for podcasting? So you have to have a strategic approach to that.
Yeah. I know a lot of my clients, because they put in a marketing budget. They're like, you know what? I know a podcast is going to be so beneficial for my brand.
Yeah.
They make that investment. And so they are then able to hire an editor or hire like someone like from me and my team. As a podcast production company, we help manage all of that. We do the editing for you. We can help you launch your show by creating some of those branding aspects of it. But how about when podcasters are, what you were saying, they have those foundations. They are aware of who they are. Their organization or their business has an existing brand. What should then they be aware of to integrate that brand into their podcast? Because their podcast is an extension of their brand. So what needs to be integrated or what needs to be different?
Okay, so you have to have an integrated approach, an integrated branding approach or integrated marketing communications approach, because it's part, as you say, it's becoming part of the brand. Maybe it's even an individual brand within your brand franchise. Let's say it like that. For example, my business is called Brigitte Brands. But my podcast, it's Brands Talk. So Brands Talk is a sub-brand that belongs to Brigitte Brands. So Brigitte Brands infuses meaning into Brands Talk, but vice versa as well. Brands Talk is my podcast, but it also leads back to my company, Brigitte Brands, me being a coach and a consultant for entrepreneurs. So what is important here, that every brand has a brand identity. Brands Talk has a brand identity and Brigitte Brand has an identity. And each identity consists of brand elements. It's the logo, it's the name, it's the fonts, it's the color, it's the taglines, it's everything. Your look and feel, your brand voice. And that needs to be aligned. You need to harmonize visual and also then when it comes to your podcast, the auditory elements. So you need to decide on your music, your sound content that you embed, yeah, because it's going to act like a jingle. When people hear the first, the rhythm, the tempo, the intensity, the whole, the tonality, everything, they have to associate that with your brand. That's Brands Talk, or that's your show. You remember that, yeah? A jingle like Coca-Cola during Christmas. You know that's that.
My favorite one is always like McDonald's. Everyone knows the one from like the 90s, that ba-da-da-da-da. We always talk about that in radio when I worked in radio. This is all audio branding.
Yeah, and that's called a jingle. And your intro or outro is a jingle. That is a brand element. And all these elements should be consistent, yeah? So across all the different platforms that you are or touch points that you have with your audience. So for example, you can extend your podcast artwork that is shown on the smartphones, yeah, on the platforms, but it's also shown as a blog or post on social media. It's shown on your website. Yeah. So you try to be consistent across all these channels.
Yeah, and I would also say with like all of this audio branding talk, and you were saying brand voice, and I would say your literal voice as well can be part of that package because how you say something, your cadence, your pacing, that energy that you as the host or the guest brings to the table is part of your brand. So I think
Absolutely.
it's so key for people to consistently, as you were saying, to be on podcasts, because then you can hone in on what that will sound like. What is that brand? How does that sound? But you need practice on multiple episodes to really hone in and figure that out.
Exactly, exactly. And as you say, we have the voice, and that's what we speak. And the voice is also then that lets us feel. So the brand voice can also be the feeling that you have as a listener. So it's actually the look and the feel of a brand.
Yes, I love that. I mean, one of the things that I always say, my tagline, I guess you could say, you were saying
Mhm.
tagline so much, is how do you want your listener to feel? And that ties so much to what you're saying.
Yeah, because the feeling is something that people can resonate with. That's what people remember. It's not what you say. Yeah, it's what you do. It's the feeling that comes across. Yeah, that stays with the clients or with the audience. Yeah, this is the last thing they can connect with at the end of the day.
Exactly. And that makes me think about AI, the other end of that
Yeah.
spectrum.
Oh my God.
you know, you can't get away from it these days. Everyone is talking about it. You can't ignore it. So, how do we, aside from the feelings that we were just mentioning, how do we bring that human approach to our brand when AI is just becoming more and more dominant?
I mean, AI is a fantastic and a powerful tool, but it's not perfect. I think everyone is already using it in this online space because it's offered also, it's integrated in the software and all the platforms that we are right now. But we have to treat it cautiously. We have to do a validation check. Because whatever it generates, it still has limitations. And it really very much depends on how you feed it, on your prompts, how specific you are. I would not rely when it comes to research on AI because I tried it out and I know my craft. I've been doing that for 30 years. Yeah? It doesn't know. You have to feed it first. So you have to really be an expert. You need to understand your audience. I mean, when you feed it with the right data, you can get the clear cut audience. This is beautiful, but you have to feed it first. You need to understand your story and you need to know who you are. You need to have a well-defined brand identity. And then AI can really be, and we say it in German language. I don't know whether there is also a saying in the English language, a Speedy Gonzales. Yeah, it's someone
Ah,
who is
yes.
who is a contributor or something that really speeds it up. It's a tool. It's a wonderful tool, but it's not a master. The master is you. You are the brains behind it. So just imagine your podcast is a unique piece of music or song. AI functions as the instrument, while you as the host or the guest, you're the singer. You infuse the soul and the emotions. Because if you take out this human element, your podcast is noise out there in the space. There is nothing. And now in the face, in the wake of AI, where AI is dominating, people are hungry for the humans behind. They want to connect with people. They want to connect with the soul. They want to connect with something that is authentic, that they can relate to. Personal branding and a brand identity and the narrative behind it, the stories that we tell, will become more and more important. And I think that the pairing of the two is where the magic comes in.
Yeah, we're still figuring that out. I think
Yeah.
that's the thing. Everyone's just like, I'm going to keep playing with this AI thing because it's interesting.
Yeah.
But it is that human side that people are craving for, especially in a post-pandemic world. So in this, I don't want to say new world, but in the current space that we are in, what are you excited about in podcasting?
Okay, I'm really excited, still excited about. I mean, I've been doing it only for 3 years, but I'm still excited about engaging with people and listening to stories, learning about my guest stories and understanding and hearing their unique perspectives. And they all give so much wisdom and have valuable insights. And there's so much to learn from and take away from. So this is the first thing that I'm really excited about, the stories, the humans,
Yeah, the humans, exactly.
And then, of course, now also that YouTube is integrating podcasts, even though it's
that's
very
very
often,
new.
yeah, and because it's just audio. But a lot of people have audio and video podcasts, and that enhances the brand building experience and opens new avenues for audio engagement that wasn't there before, because YouTube, I mean, is a huge social media channel that everyone knows, everyone goes on, everyone is searching for something and so on. Yeah. And then I also like, from a technical perspective as a host and producer, the new platforms, the recording platforms like Squadcast, and then, you can edit in Descript via transcripts. So I think that also makes it so much more easier and shortens the time. And also with AI helping to, reduce the time that you sit to bring about and publish an episode. And also the community aspect, I think, because podcasting also serves as a huge hub for meaningful connections, as I say, with business partners. Partners become referrals. Listeners maybe become clients. So there's a community that is growing. And also when we two getting together, a kind of a co-branding for that specific episode, because we are expanding our reach.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, and it's ever evolving. You have to be flexible and go with new technological advancements, and there's always something new happening. Sometimes it can be stressful because you have to pick up. But other than that, usually it's helping you to accomplish stuff easier and makes your life easier, I think. Yeah. What about you as a podcasting expert?
I love all the changes as well, but a lot of change can also mean a lot of work depending on what those changes are. But like you were saying, there's
Exactly.
so many new technological advances that it makes the industry really exciting. In the previous career of mine in radio, so we're talking broadcasting in general, it's an old medium that has not changed much over the years. So I love how podcasting is ever evolving, and they're quick to evolve with the changing times, where I feel like radio was just kind of sitting back, looking, thinking, oh no, I'm the dominant player. I'm going to see what's going to happen before I do anything. And it always felt slow to me. So that's why I love podcasting. There's always so much to learn and to do, and things are changing and evolving with the times as the person, the listener, or the host needs it. And I love that.
Yeah, and I hardly listen to any radio anymore, really hardly, because why should I listen to something that I'm not really interested in? Just that there is some background noise. But, with podcasting, or I also listen to a lot of different podcasts, especially when it comes to mindset and personal development. I really am intentional in what I'm listening to, because I'm constantly learning, and I just love that. And when I want to listen to music, okay, then I play my playlist on Spotify.
You get to choose that.
Yes, I get to choose, and I choose wisely. It's not just something that is out there. It's about, nowadays we stream more intentionally. We are making decisions that favor us.
Yeah. that directly impact our lives.
Exactly. Yeah. Because with radio, there's always something, oh my God, I don't like this song, or what are they talking about? I don't care.
And I think that's the thing too, like in radio, it comes from broadcast. And that word literally means broad, means not niche, not narrowed down. It is one generic way to cast it out to the entire population. And so you can't please everybody that way. And that's why I feel like podcasting is so great, because if you are looking for something very specific, there is a podcast out there. And if there isn't, you need to create one and have a brand around it.
Yeah, that's how it is.
Brigitte, it was so great to have you on the show. We got to wrap this up because we can talk about branding forever, I think.
Yes. I mean, we just, touched the surface.
Exactly.
But once you know who you are as a brand, you have built your brand identity and you have some spare time, and you think this is something that you love doing. And I really, really want to highlight love. It brings you joy and you have passion. Then do it. Do it. Yeah, you might already have an audience on LinkedIn or on Instagram or on Facebook or wherever that is. Why not at least try it? How you feel like and doing it. Maybe you really love it and that's your thing.
Yeah. I always say it's kind of like my life motto. I'm not going to do it if it's not fun.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great being your guest today, and I really feel honored. Thank you so much.
Brigitte is right. You have to love doing it. So if podcasting is not fun, don't do it. Don't put all that energy into it. But like I said, podcasting is fun, so that's why I keep doing it. This conversation reminded me also of that story that I quickly mentioned in the episode about radio being slow. And years ago, when apps were still a new thing, and the catchphrase everybody always said was, well, there's an app for that. In that era is when I realized radio was slow to adopt new technology. So how was the industry going to shift and change? And to really innovate radio listening back in the day, I remember my direct manager had this amazing idea at the time that the radio station itself should have an app. That way, they can listen to the radio station wherever they are, not being confined to just the broadcast area of the frequency, but also like to link to our events, our blog, our contact information, enter contests. Like, this was next level idea back in the day. And so he brought it up to his manager. But that next level of management thought it was a silly idea and wouldn't even bring it up to the upper management, which really was a loss. We could have been a leader in the industry because it never happened. Well, it never happened in my time in radio. But today, with so many apps for everything, the radio station, they do have an app now. Well, technically not the same, but they do have an app. And this is many years later, where they're coming late to the adoption of tech for listeners. And so their brand was not a leader in their space. It takes that innovation in your brand or your product or service to be a leader in your industry. So I'm learning from my radio days, taking a lesson from it. And as Brigitte says, we are more intentional now on what we choose to listen to or consume as a listener and consumer. We like to tailor things to our interests. So the idea of a broad marketing strategy, or in the radio case, broadcasting, as I said in the episode, isn't as effective. To help you hone in on your marketing foundations, Brigitte actually has a entrepreneur starting branding checklist for you to download. It will be in the show notes, of course, on your listening app for you to click on, or also on my website at visiblevoicepodcast.com for this episode, number 73. Her checklist actually would be a great accompaniment to see how your podcast brand stands out. So when listeners are listening to your show, your podcast is there to build that relationship and target this niche approach to your brand. However, like we said in the conversation, The discovery part is not an overnight thing. Podcasting is a long-term marketing strategy. So if you are on this long game with me or want to know more about how to launch your show and integrate your brand into your podcast, I'm always up for a conversation on how podcasting can work for you. Hit me up over email at visiblevoicepodcast@gmail.com. And that is also the place where you can share your feedback from this episode. I would love to hear what you thought about branding and marketing for your podcast. Start the conversation with me, and let's see how we can propel your brand with a podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the Podcaster's Guide to a Visible Voice. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you'd share it with a podcasting friend. And to reveal more voicing and podcasting tips, click on over to visiblevoicepodcast.com. Until next time.